Across America, millions now live in RVs, working people who turned to vehicles when rent became impossible. But a new law is targeting those homes on wheels.
Any and everywhere you go, in and out of stores, homeless.
We're ordering a property owner to immediately stop renting out trailers and RVs on his properties,
Giving local governments the power to seize and auction them without warning. 11 states have already signed on. Officials say it's regulation. Critics call it erasure. Either way, it's transforming homelessness from a crisis into a crime. Behind every tow truck is a life being dismantled. Legally, efficiently, invisibly. And here's the part nobody's talking about. The same policy being used against RV residents today could be used against you tomorrow. Let me show you how. The regulation that changed everything. The Vehicle Habitation Enforcement Act sounds bureaucratic and boring until you read what it actually does. This model legislation was drafted in late 2024 by a coalition of municipal lobby groups, primarily the National League of Cities, in response to what they called the RV crisis in urban and suburban areas. By January 2025, 11 states had adopted versions of it. Some passed it through state legislatures. Others implemented it through county ordinances or city codes. But the core framework is nearly identical across jurisdictions, and that framework fundamentally changed the legal status of anyone living in an RV. Here's what the law actually says. It defines unauthorized habitation as the use of any vehicle for sleeping, eating, or living purposes for more than 72 consecutive hours in any location that isn't a licensed campground or RV park. It establishes evidence of residential use as including but not limited to bedding visible through windows, food storage beyond camping supplies, personal belongings indicating permanent occupancy, waste tanks showing regular use, utility hookups to water or power, mail delivery to the vehicle, or anyone claiming the vehicle as their primary residence. And here's the part that weaponizes enforcement. It grants code enforcement officers, not just police, the authority to inspect vehicles, issue impound orders, and initiate the seizure process without requiring a court hearing first. Previous regulations in most states treated RVs the same as cars for parking purposes. You could park on public streets as long as you moved periodically and weren't violating specific parking restrictions. If there was a problem, you'd get a warning, then a citation, then potentially a tow after multiple violations and opportunities to comply. The new law eliminates all of that. Code enforcement can tag your RV on first contact. You get 72 hours to remove it from the jurisdiction and provide proof of alternative housing. If you can't, they impound it. And once it's impounded, you have 14 days to pay all fees and fines and prove the vehicle won't be used for habitation, or it goes to public auction. Timeline matters here because this moved faster than almost any housing-related legislation in recent history. Model language circulated among city attorneys in November 2024. First state adoption happened in Arizona in early January 2025. California counties started implementing it by late January. By March, enforcement operations were active in parts of Arizona, California, New Mexico, Oregon, Colorado, Texas, Florida, Nevada, Washington, Tennessee, and Idaho. That's 11 states in less than 4 months. And in every single one of those states, people living in RVs woke up one morning to find notices on their windshields telling them they had 3 days to prove they weren't living in their homes or lose them permanently. Who actually pushed this law matters because it reveals who it's designed to protect. The National League of Cities represents municipal governments, and their member cities were facing enormous pressure from homeowners and real estate interests about RVs parked in residential neighborhoods. Homeowners claimed it hurt property values. Real estate agents said it made homes harder to sell. Neighborhood associations demanded action, and city councils, which respond to the voters who show up at meetings, gave them what they wanted. There was no equivalent lobbying effort from people living in RVs because they're scattered, politically unorganized, and most of them are just trying to survive day to day. So the law got written by people who wanted RVs gone, passed by legislators who never talked to anyone living in one, and implemented by code enforcement agencies that got new funding and authority to sweep neighborhoods clean. But understanding who wrote the law and why only tells you part of the story. To really grasp what this regulation does, you need to see how enforcement actually works on the ground, step by step, and how each part of the process is designed to make escape impossible once you're caught in it. The system that destroys people. Once this law takes effect in your area, getting caught in the enforcement pipeline follows a sequence so predictable you can map it like a flowchart. Each step leads inevitably to the next, and unless you have resources most people living in RVs don't have, there's no way out. Let me walk you through exactly how this works, because understanding the mechanism is the only way to avoid it. First comes the registration trap, and it's deliberately designed to be impossible to escape. The new law requires proof of non-residential registration for your RV. Essentially, you must demonstrate that the vehicle isn't your primary residence. But here's the problem. Nearly every state requires a permanent physical address to register any vehicle. Not a post office box, not a mail forwarding service, an actual residential address. If you're living in the RV because you lost your housing or can't afford housing, you don't have that address. You might use a friend's address or a family member's address, but if enforcement investigates and discovers you're not actually living there, that's fraud, which creates additional criminal exposure, so you're trapped. You need an address to register the vehicle in a way that proves you're not living in it, but you can't get that address because you are living in it. The law creates a requirement that makes compliance literally impossible for the people it targets. Next comes the inspection weapon, and this is where enforcement gets invasive. Under the new regulations, code enforcement officers in designated zones can conduct habitability inspections if they have reasonable suspicion that a vehicle is being used as a dwelling. Reasonable suspicion can be almost anything. Curtains on the windows, someone seen entering or exiting multiple times, condensation on windows suggesting someone slept inside, extension cords running to the vehicle. Once they decide to inspect, they can require you to open the door and allow them to look inside. If you refuse, that's grounds for immediate impound based on failure to cooperate with investigation. If you allow them in, they're looking for bedding, food storage beyond what they consider camping supplies, personal belongings indicating permanent occupancy, waste tanks that show regular use, any utility hookups. If they find evidence of habitation, they tag the vehicle. You get a notice affixed to the door stating you have 72 hours to remove the vehicle from the jurisdiction and provide documentation of alternative housing arrangements. 72 hours, 3 days. And you need to prove you have somewhere else to live, not just leave the area. Actually document that you're moving into housing. A lease agreement? A hotel receipt for at least 30 days, a letter from someone stating you're moving into their home. If you can't provide that documentation, or if you simply move the RV to another part of the same city, code enforcement can order an immediate impound. And this is where the financial destruction begins. Impound fees start the moment the tow truck hooks up your vehicle. Towing charges for RVs range from $200 for a small camper van to $800 for a large Class A motorhome. Then come storage fees, which run from $50 to $120 per day, depending on the facility and the size of your vehicle. You have 14 days from the impound date to pay all accumulated fees, pay any outstanding fines related to the violation, and provide proof that the vehicle will not be used for residential purposes going forward. Let's do that math. Small RV, lowest fees, $200 for towing plus 14 days at $50 per day equals $900. Large motorhome, higher fees, $800 for towing plus 14 days at $120 per day equals $2,480. And remember, the people living in these vehicles are doing so because they can't afford housing. They're working jobs that pay $20 to $25 per hour if they're lucky. They're living paycheck to paycheck with maybe $100 or $200 in savings if they have any savings at all. They don't have $900. They certainly don't have $2,400, so they can't get their vehicles back. After 14 days, if fees remain unpaid, the RV goes to public auction. The municipality files a lien against the vehicle for all fees and costs. The auction happens, usually within 30 to 45 days. Buyers can bid on vehicles they know are being sold for a fraction of value. A motorhome that costs someone $60,000 new and might still be worth $20,000 to $30,000 gets sold for $4,000 or $5,000. The municipality recovers its fees. The auction company takes its cut, and the original owner gets nothing. Everything they owned that was inside the vehicle when it was impounded gets 30 days in storage, then goes to the dump. Personal documents, family photos, tools, clothing, medications, everything. There's a process to retrieve personal property, but it requires showing up during business hours, which most people can't do if they're working, and you get one visit, 20 minutes, 2 boxes. Whatever doesn't fit gets destroyed. And now comes the final cascade, the one that reveals how completely this law fails at its stated purpose. The person who just lost their RV is now on the street with nothing, no shelter, no transportation, no possessions. They still need somewhere to sleep, but now they don't even have the minimal protection of a vehicle. If they were working, they probably just lost that job because they can't get there anymore, or because they missed shifts dealing with the impound crisis, or because they no longer have an address or a phone number that works. If they were receiving any benefits or services, those get disrupted because caseworkers can't reach them. If they had kids in school, those kids just became homeless without even a vehicle to sleep in. The law that was supposedly designed to address homelessness just created more of it, but in a worse form, because at least when someone lives in an RV, they have shelter, security, and mobility. Take that away and you've just pushed them into total destitution. But they're no longer visible in a large RV parked on a residential street, so from the city's perspective, problem solved. These aren't abstract policy outcomes or theoretical consequences. These are real people losing everything right now because of a system designed to punish visibility rather than solve problems. And to understand what that actually means, you need to meet the people living through it, where enforcement is happening right now. If you're living in an RV, the most important thing you need to know is whether your area is actively enforcing the new regulations and how aggressively. Enforcement isn't uniform across entire states. It's concentrated in specific counties and cities, usually high-cost metros, where RV populations became visible enough to generate political pressure. But the pattern is spreading rapidly, and areas that aren't enforcing yet are watching the cities that are to see if the approach works politically. Arizona was the first state to implement comprehensive enforcement, starting in Maricopa County in January. Phoenix, Tempe, and Scottsdale have conducted monthly sweeps since February. Tucson started enforcement in March. California has been more fragmented, but more aggressive overall. Riverside County and San Bernardino County began enforcement in late January. Los Angeles County started pilot enforcement in March in specific neighborhoods. San Diego has targeted areas near the beach and in East County. Sacramento started sweeps in April. The Bay Area has been inconsistent, with some cities enforcing aggressively and others not yet implementing the regulations at all. New Mexico's enforcement has focused almost entirely on Albuquerque, where the city council passed an emergency ordinance in February. Santa Fe has discussed implementation, but hasn't begun active enforcement. Oregon's enforcement started in Portland, and Eugene in late February. Bend began enforcement in April. Washington State's enforcement is concentrated in Seattle and King County, which started sweeps in March. Tacoma and Spokane have announced they'll begin enforcement, but haven't started operations yet. Colorado's enforcement is almost entirely Denver Metro. The city started aggressive sweeps in early March and has been the most active enforcer in the state. Aurora and Lakewood have begun limited enforcement. Colorado Springs has discussed implementation but hasn't started. Texas enforcement has been concentrated in Austin, which started in February, and San Antonio, which started in March. Houston has announced plans but hasn't begun operations. Dallas hasn't implemented the regulations yet. Florida's enforcement started in multiple cities simultaneously in March. Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, and Miami all began operations within 2 weeks of each other. Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach started in April. Nevada's enforcement is almost entirely Clark County, which includes Las Vegas. Operations began in late February and have been extremely aggressive, with multiple weekly sweeps. Reno hasn't started enforcement yet. Tennessee's enforcement is concentrated in Nashville, which began operations in March. Memphis has discussed implementation but hasn't started. Idaho's enforcement is focused on Boise and the surrounding county, which started sweeps in late March. The pattern is clear. Enforcement is concentrated in cities with high housing costs, visible RV populations, and political pressure from homeowners and real estate interests. How enforcement actually happens varies by jurisdiction but follows similar patterns everywhere. Most areas started with complaint-driven enforcement. Neighbors report RVs. Code enforcement investigates. If they confirm habitation, they issue notices and start the impound process. But increasingly, cities are moving to proactive sweeps. They identify priority zones, usually areas near schools, parks, libraries, or waterways. They send teams through those zones systematically, tagging every RV that shows signs of habitation. These sweeps happen with little warning. Sometimes residents get notices a week in advance. Sometimes they wake up to enforcement already in progress. And once a sweep begins, everyone in that area gets processed the same day. The auction reality is something most people don't understand until it happens to them. Impounded RVs don't just sit in lots waiting for owners to claim them. After the 14-day deadline passes, they go to public auction quickly. Cities want to recover their costs and clear space in impound lots. Auctions happen weekly or bi-weekly, depending on volume. Buyers show up knowing they're getting vehicles for a fraction of value. Some buyers are individuals looking for deals. But increasingly, there are professional buyers who seem to win multiple vehicles at every auction. There's documentation in several cities of the same buyers winning 10, 15, 20 vehicles over a few months. Meanwhile, the original owners have no right to the proceeds, even if the vehicle sells for more than the impound fees. The city takes its costs off the top. The auction house takes its commission. Any remaining money goes to lien holders, if there are any. The original owner gets nothing. Understanding where enforcement is happening and how it operates is critical for immediate survival. But here's what makes this entire situation even more infuriating. Other cities have already solved this problem. The solutions exist. They work, they cost less than enforcement, and they actually help people instead of just moving them around or destroying their last assets. The solutions nobody wants to implement. Eugene, Oregon developed something called the RV Parking Program in 2023, before the new enforcement law took full effect. The city identified several underutilized parking lots on public land. They installed basic services, porta potties, trash service, and a waste dump station. They assigned case managers to work with people parked there. Participants could stay as long as they were actively working toward housing goals. No arbitrary time limits, no 72-hour shuffling. Just stability while people rebuilt. The program cost the city roughly $350 per vehicle per month, including all services and case management. After 18 months of operation, 68% of participants had transitioned into permanent housing. The program worked, but when the new enforcement law came in, the City Council voted to eliminate the program and redirect the funding to enforcement operations instead. Los Angeles runs something more intensive called Safe Park LA. It's not just parking, it functions as a full vehicle triage center. Participants get access to showers, laundry facilities, mail service, legal aid, mental health counseling, and medical care on site. Housing navigators work with each person to get identification documents, apply for benefits, search for apartments, and navigate lease applications. The program tracks detailed metrics. Average time from intake to full document recovery, 15 days. Average time from intake to employment or benefits approval, 37 days. Average time from intake to lease signing, 4.5 months. And the number that actually matters most, 85% of participants are still housed 2 years later. They're not cycling back into homelessness or vehicle dwelling, they're maintaining stability. Los Angeles proves this works. But the program serves maybe 200 people in a city where tens of thousands live in vehicles. Seattle took a different approach with master lease programs. The city and several large nonprofits lease entire apartment buildings from private owners. Then they sublease individual units to people transitioning out of homelessness. No credit checks, no background checks beyond sex offender registry, no requirement to prove income at 3 times the rent, just a lease and a case manager. Participants pay 30% of their income toward rent, whatever that income happens to be. The program covers the difference initially. Over time, as people's income increases through employment or benefits, they take on a larger share until eventually they're paying market rate or they transition to their own independent lease. Analysis shows that people in master lease housing are 6 times more likely to maintain stable housing after 2 years, compared to people who go directly from streets or vehicles into independent housing without support. But whether cities choose to implement real solutions or continue with enforcement, if you're living in an RV right now, you need to know how to protect yourself until something changes. What you need to do right now, if you're living in an RV, protecting yourself requires understanding how enforcement works and staying ahead of it. Start with your registration status. Make absolutely certain your RV registration is current and lists a permanent address. Use a friend's address, a family member's address, or a commercial mail receiving service that provides a physical street address rather than a box number. This doesn't guarantee protection, but it's the first thing code enforcement checks. If your registration is expired or lists the RV itself as the address, you're an immediate target. Document everything that suggests non-residential use, even if you are living in the vehicle full-time. Keep receipts from campgrounds showing you pay for spaces occasionally. Maintain a separate mailing address on all official documents. Don't register children for school using the RV as an address. Don't list it as your residence on driver's licenses or benefit applications. Create a paper trail that suggests the vehicle is for recreation rather than housing. This feels dishonest because it is dishonest, but the law creates a situation where honesty gets you impounded and careful documentation might keep you housed. Know the enforcement zones in your area. Most cities publish priority enforcement areas either in municipal code or on city websites. These are usually neighborhoods near schools, parks, libraries, waterways, or anywhere residents have organized to demand RV removal. Avoid parking in these zones entirely if possible. If you must park there, move before the 72-hour mark every single time. Set alarms. Track it obsessively. One day over, and you risk getting tagged. Connect with local RV dweller networks immediately if you haven't already. These groups use apps, social media, and text chains to share enforcement information in real time. They warn each other when sweeps are happening. They identify safe areas. They coordinate mutual aid when someone gets impounded. They share information about services and resources. Operating alone in this environment is exponentially more dangerous than operating as part of a network that can watch your back. Have an exit plan ready at all times. Know where you can move on 12 hours notice. Keep enough fuel in your tank to get there. Keep important documents, medications, and irreplaceable items in a bag you can grab immediately. If you get the 72-hour notice, don't wait to see if they're serious. They are. Move immediately. Figure out next steps after you're out of the jurisdiction. Staying and hoping they'll give you an extension or work something out is how you lose everything. What's happening here isn't just about laws. It's about lives being quietly dismantled, one tow truck at a time. If you haven't seen our last deep dive, it takes you inside one city where this crisis reached its breaking point, a place where even law enforcement started pulling back. It'll give you the full picture of how we got here and what could be coming next. And if you want to keep following the truth about America's hidden housing collapse, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on.